Hey folks, it's Sharon Blanchard. Welcome to Who's That Leader in the Mirror? For over 30 years, I have dabbled in the leadership field that culminated in a search for the perfect leadership philosophy. But as I like to say, I'm still growing up and I have so much to learn. So partly because I live in a remote area of the world, I've decided to make this podcast a shared classroom where we'll take a deep dive into leadership. How being authentic doesn't necessarily mean you're a better leader. We'll have conversations around identity, ego, and humility, about being courageous and value-centered leadership. We'll chat with leaders who understand that who they are, their identity, their sense of self, values, and beliefs are integral to their leadership approach. They're leaders who want to make changes in their approach to become a better version of themselves and realize that they need to reconcile who they are with what they do and how that's golden. It's the golden key to living their leadership approach authentically. I have cast a wide net of friends and colleagues, those I have worked with and have a tremendous amount of awe and respect for. So who's that leader in the mirror today? Father James is changing the world one parish at a time. He's a dynamo, and I've known him for over 20 years, before he became world famous. He's the pastor of Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and founder of the Divine Renovation Ministry, the author of a bestseller, Divine Renovation, From a Maintenance to a Missional Parish, and has authored and co-authored several books on leadership, evangelization, and discipleship. He currently resides in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and in addition to his ministry, loves soccer, movies, photography, dogs, everything Apple because he's a super duper techie, and a good single malt scotch. Welcome, Father James. Well, good morning, Father James. So excited to have you here on Who's That Leader in the Mirror. How are you?
Great to be with you. It's kind of weird, though.
It is. All the way from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, looking out the window in Twizel, New Zealand.
I'm looking out the window at snow right now.
Well, it's 9 a.m. and beautiful sunny skies here in the middle of summer. How crazy is that?
Yeah, crazy. Don't make me jealous.
Well, you've got to come back to New Zealand and hang out with us and continue to spread the good work that you're doing. Just kind of overwhelmed. I know we always joke around and we call you the Father Bon Jovi of the Catholic world because you've become a bit of a superstar. And when I think of Father James and I think of, I'm not surprised that you're changing the world. When I think of, when you were first ordained a priest and came to our parish way back in Herring Cove in the days, I just think, when we talk about leadership, we talk about who would you follow across the bridge? Who would you follow into the fire? And, the attributes of what we search for in academia and in the secular world, they're right there. So tell us a little bit about yourself before I give away the secrets.
Well, this is what's so strange is that, Sharon, we had a deep connection way back then when I was a young priest and I was sent to work half-time in this rural small parish, which when I first arrived there was in this very historical small town. And, the church was very much in decline, hardly anyone going there. And for many people, they would have looked and said, well, there's not going to be much that happens here. But in the 4 years I was there, I learned so much about what leadership was. And a lot of what I experienced was very instinctual, so I went there. As a young priest, I had been working with another priest that I was the assistant. And this particular other priest, a wonderful man, but had very little oomph in him, or very little. He seemed to just accept the status quo as it was going to be what it was going to be. And I had always this thing that I dreams. I had this capacity to imagine if this happened, imagine if that happened, imagine if we did this, and how much better things could be, and how much more alive, and this could happen, and that could happen. And he never seemed interested in those kinds of discussions. So by the time I was ready to be let loose, I was ready to be let loose, and I landed in this small town where you resided with your family, and almost immediately that same dynamic began to happen. It was imagine if this could happen, and that, and this, and it just everything seemed filled with possibility. And that I suppose it's a character trait from coming from within the church. I would say it's also a bit of a spiritual gift as well. That can to be a bit of a spiritual entrepreneur and to not be resigned to the status quo, to not be satisfied, to not suffer from IDD. You know what that is, right?
Mm.
IDD.
Right, I don't know.
Imagination deficit disorder.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I didn't know what that was.
So many people have in different areas of life that this lack of imagination. So that was the first thing, that this idea of possibility. Incredible. Everywhere I looked, I saw possibility. And then I had my first weekend of masses at that parish, and it was one of the most horrible experiences of my life. It just seemed so dead. It was like, I wanted to scream. It was like a zombie convention. It was like everyone looked bloody miserable. And I don't know if you were there, if you had, we connected with church at that point, but it was this sense of, oh my goodness, not only is there a sense of dreaming of what can be, I am very dissatisfied with the way things presently are. Like, there's no way we're giving into this. And so between those two realities of dissatisfaction with the way things are and having dreams about what could be, then you're in the middle. You've got these human dynamics. And I guess what we witnessed in 4 years, because I think back of what we did in this tiny parish, that when we first went there, we weren't even bringing enough finances to pay my salary. The previous
4 years?
Just 4 years, yeah. But it's incredible what we saw happen in 4 years, because effectively the place was mobilized, and that I've never forgotten that experience. Like, because people say, well, the only churches that can really have high impact on their community are these big suburban churches and all this. It's like, no, I was in a little country church, and we saw 50% of our churchgoers mobilized, taking ownership of the mission of the organization, becoming engaged, becoming enthusiastic, becoming excited, putting their shoulders to the wagon. And we did. Well, we renovated the church building, we renovated the rectory, we renovated the grounds. We put on a province-wide festival that included racing, with boat racing, and people came all over our little parish did this. Well, it was the people who mobilized and took ownership. We remember the time we put on a youth conference for the entire diocese. We brought in a Catholic rock band from Texas with air miles.
Yeah.
Like, what did here's the crazy?
It wasn't it Daniel Del Silva?
Something like that. But we didn't know enough to know that we weren't supposed to be able to do this.
And that's, you're bringing back so many memories I forgot about, because I fulfilled my dream that day of the big race day, because I was the announcer looking over. And I was like, woohoo, I've got a microphone. I can go crazy.
Well, we did that for a couple of years in a row.
How is that just 4 years, though? That seems like it was like a decade. We did so much in such a short period of time. It's crazy.
Well, what it taught me, a couple of things. Number one, again, never be satisfied with the way things are. We have that healthy dissatisfaction, but we would say in church circles, a godly discontent. Now, in a more secular field, and I think from a psychological perspective, people can relate to it. Discontent is proper balanced discontent is a good thing to have, but be wary, be on guard. Don't let the discontent sour you. Don't let it turn you don't let it become anger. Because that can then begin to be really toxic, so you've got to guard that. So, but have that discontent, stoke the capacity to dream, whether that's by meeting other leaders who inspire you, other people who inspire you, or going to conferences and meeting people, being awed by people who are doing incredible things. Keep that capacity to dream alive, and then believe that when you mobilize people and delegate, obviously, don't just delegate tasks, delegate authority and responsibility. When you do that in an appropriate way, according to the trust that exists, incredible things happen. Yeah. And you have this situation where, you've got this in 4 years in a relatively little tiny parish. We saw amazing things happen that are not supposed to be possible. So I've looked back on those years, and I think, well, that experience set some of my convictions for life, that it is possible it is possible to mobilize people.
Yeah.
For great impact.
And people have a natural, like you have a natural propensity where people navigate toward you and believe in you and trust in you. Why do you think that is?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think I've always been a bit of an intense person. And I do most things intensely, including, unhealthy. It's like it just seems to be my personality. Like at Christmas, I'll eat the box of chocolates with great intensity. But I finally take time. I may be the type of person it's hard for me to take time off, to stop, to slow down. But when I finally manage to do that, I usually be able to do that with great intensity. So I have that intensity, and if in the things that I believe, I usually believe strongly, and I guess that ability to ask those bigger questions and unlock in other people a desire for something greater, the capacity to imagine. I think also I kind of a crazy kind of, like, I've always been a bit of a ready, fire, aim person. I know that the more strategic types who want to, plan for every single possibility and come right up all the plans. I drive them crazy. And by the way, they drive me crazy as well. I mean, I know there's going to be a healthy balance, but just kind of like plowing ahead and saying, look, we'll figure this out on the fly. Okay, sometimes it fails miserably, but 60% of the time it doesn't. And and when things happen, it's exciting. It's a real adventure. And I think here's one of the things in church culture and organizational culture, we've become so risk adverse. Risk management has become risk elimination. You want to eliminate risk, don't get out of bed in the morning. In fact, don't even go to bed. Like you can't eliminate risk. And when you live trying to, contain the possibility of risk, you stifle creativity. Nothing great is ever going to happen, because your organizational culture is going to suffocate any kind of innovative thought, because it's just too risky. So yeah.
And we talk a lot about, in the leadership circles, well, we didn't talk a lot about courage, right? And when you look at those leaders who are willing, I always think of that Alpha conference we attended how many years ago in Toronto, and I always make the 10 centimeter hedge, I always say, was a 6-foot hedge, and Father James jumped over it to go and meet Nicky Gumbel, right? To have the courage, it's one of my best visions when you saw him and you went over to say hello, but I say it was a 6-foot hedge, joking around. But to have the courage to follow through on things, and to have the courage, we don't talk about courage in leaders as much as we should, because there's something within an individual that enables them to kind of follow through. Not everyone can do that. It takes a special individual, right? And to have people follow them, I keep saying over that bridge, but when you think of, yes, you're intense, but what else is it about you, that you think and that really draws people to you, your ability to draw people to you, but to follow you and to do, things like build, a city within a small community in Herring Cove, a city of people that literally went from being zombies to being absolutely empowered and filled with the Holy Spirit and filled with an ability to go out and change and look changed and transformed, right?
I think of, in my last church, St. Benedict, I wrote about my early years there, my experience there in my first book, Divine Renovation. One of my staff members, who was a great outside of the box thinker. I mean, I thought I was kind of out of the box, but we took risks. I mean, I called him and invited him to leave his job and come and move to the city and help us do something crazy. And it was a crazy proposition. And guess what? He said yes. Yeah. It was absolutely nuts. And amazing things happened. And one of the things he always used to say to me is that, James, one of the reasons why, you expect greatness from people. You really that's the starting point, and you communicate that, and I guess, I mean, I've never thought about it like that, and I never, so much of what I did in leadership, including my mistakes, my terrible mistakes, and my flaws were very unintentional. So a lot of it was done instinctually, and I was kind of like unconsciously competent and incompetent, and a lot of reading and learning and studying and going to conferences and learning from other leaders and learning about leadership to be intentional. It was kind of having my eyes open to patterns that I actually already recognized. It was like, oh, so that's what it's called. And now that I have a greater understanding of it, I can be much more intentional about it, about both leaning into what works and trying to avoid the kind of flaws in my own leadership as well.
I, as you know, worked in the university culture for my entire, like, over 30 years. And I have felt since leaving that culture that it's been really challenging for me to get out of the mind frame of being that it's okay to make mistakes. Because when you're in that world, it's not okay to make mistakes, and you're penalized and you're treated differently. And, one of the things is the beauty that comes from making mistakes and the power of learning in those mistakes, right? And how you internalize that and how you use that information to learn and to grow. And so it's been a real kind of journey for me, because, used to traditional kind of hammer down management styles, that really didn't give me the freedom. Like, we're all still learning, but literally I'm still trying to find myself and go, like, who am I? Right. And what have I learned along that journey? So similarly, who are you? What have you learned along that journey?
Oh boy. I mean, one of my key convictions, and something that I, sometimes, often speak about at conferences, and it's one of the core elements of the model of leadership that we teach in the ministry that we call Divine Renovation. We work with thousands of church leaders around the world, and I think right now 75 countries. And one of the models, the central thing of the model of leadership is a team sport. There's no such thing as a well-rounded person. We have this myth in the Western world, anyway, of formation that, your kid brings home 4 A's and 1 B, the B's in math. What do you say? You got to work on your math. We have this illusion of the possibility of being a well-rounded person, and it just doesn't exist. We're all warped. We're all weird. We're all, in a more positive way, as the Psalm says, beautifully and wonderfully made. We all have very unique and singular strengths and capacities, gifts, and we all have blind spots and flaws. And we can seek to, minimize the impact of those blind spots. We can try to maximize the impact of our strengths, but don't speak about balance. There's no balance. We're all wonderfully imbalanced. And so there's no such thing as a balanced person, but there can be a balanced team. And so, team-based leadership, I think, is at every level of any organization is highly preferable. And when I say team-based leadership, it exists. We speak about leadership teams. Our thinking and experience has been very much shaped by the writings of Patrick Lencioni, who's a fantastic guy. I consider him to be a personal friend as well. And the idea of a leadership team where it's authentic, it is shared leadership. So the leader, if the leader of the organization is, and it's not leadership, here's the thing, it's not leadership by committee. It's not mere consultation. So it's not just consultation, but it's not leadership by committee. The leader is the leader, but it is actually shared leadership. That team shares responsibility for the success and failure of the organization and the mission. And that exists in a tension that is very difficult sometimes in reality to bring to fruition. But when it happens, it is amazing. And what it means is that the leader will unconsciously shift language. Instead of talking about I, me, and I, it's we and us. The language will always be we and us. And if we speak about four non-negotiables: unanimity of vision. So that basically we're all rowing in the same direction. Like that is non-negotiable. You don't negotiate unanimity of vision, because if you have two visions, you have division, right? The second non-negotiable is it's balance of strengths. You want a balanced team, right? So whatever tool you use to do your personality profiles, whereas DISC or Myers-Briggs or Clifton Strengths Finders or blah blah blah, whatever it is. I mean, they all kind of boil down similar dynamics. You've got different traits and different, usually relational, strategic, executing, and influencing in some ways or another. But whatever tool you use, you want to bring balance. Here's the thing too: if you're not intentional about balancing your team, even a small team like 4 or 5 people, leadership team is a small team, as opposed to maybe like an executive team, which is going to be much bigger based on the size of your organization. If you're not intentional about balancing that team, there's a good chance that it won't be balanced, and you'll actually have a collective blind spot. So kind of defeats the purpose. You want to really be intentional about building balance on your team, so you have, as a team, 360 vision. And then you want vulnerability-based trust. And that's a clincher. That's such a hard thing to get, because you've got the leader is the boss, and there's that power structure, and it's going to be authentic trust. The whole adage that an organization moves at the speed of trust. So trust, friendship, love, care for one another, respect for one another. So when you've got real trust for one another, respect, when people are vulnerable and real, they take off the masks, they stop pretending to have all the answers, they're honest, they're able to apologize and speak into one another. And when you're on board with the vision, what happens is that it creates the space to have fantastic disagreements about the strategy and the tactics.
That's
and
right.
To even speak into each other when we think there's a bad decision, and therefore to have healthy conflict.
Yeah, exactly.
See, every organization, every leadership team, every team is going to have conflict, but most of the time in most of our organizations, it's anything but healthy. And healthy conflict is just another name for politics. So when you have that healthy conflict, it's really beautiful. And it takes a lot of time and energy to get this, but when it happens, I think we minimize the chance that we're going to make bad decisions, especially if we're taking risks. In any organization today, look, to change means you're taking a risk, because it's adaptive leadership, right? If you're going to break out of the status quo, it means that you're going off the map and you're taking a risk. You're going to innovate. You're going to take a risk. And any organization, even the university, that refuses to innovate is in denial and is blind, because the world around us is changing. If we want to stay faithful to our mission, we must, by definition, also change our methodology. Not our mission, not our purpose, not our core values, but our model, how we actually do things. But in the long run, most organizations by their actions, their words, reveal that they're actually are more deeply attached to their method than they are to their mission.
Yeah.
So we need to change, and I think a team approach is to leadership is the best way to go about it. So that's what I've learned, because I say often, and it's true, those who get to know me say, "Wow, you weren't kidding." By myself, I'm actually not that good.
Well, and it's that acknowledgement and the vulnerability to be able to have that acknowledgement as a leader, in whatever role that you're taking on. And it's that, one of the things I talk about a lot is that it's letting, and I used to do this in my teaching, it's, I might be the content expert, but when I walk into that classroom, it's about a community of learners, and it's leaving that ego at the door. And it's about starting at a place where we all start together and we build together. But philosophically, you have to believe in that. You have to live it, and you have to experience it. I think in it, a lot of what's happening in leadership traditionally, and is slow to change in kind of the secular sense, is, training and workshops is still about, methodology, going in and learning as a group how to make changes. But for me, it's all about that individual. It's like you used to say, one soul at a time. It's changing that leadership approach and philosophy, if it's possible, one individual at a time, and going through that process and the sense of identity of who I am. Who do I want to be? When am I that best version of myself? How do I love? How do I trust? And so, and
Yeah,
building, and I was just
just
going to say, and building the environment where someone, because I do a lot of one-on-one leadership coaching, but then I do work with companies. And so what I find is when I work with the CEO of the company one-on-one, and then we work with the team, it's like magic happens. And it's beautiful to see, but I really, in my limited experience, it's working with those individuals one-on-one to build that better team. Because if you don't have that individual with that belief system and that understanding and experience, nothing will ever change. Does that make sense?
Of course, yeah. It's the whole thing, using some powerful words there, talking about love, and as the great 20th century philosopher Tina Turner once asked, "What is love?" But a secondhand emotion. I mean, what is it when we say love? I mean, for instance, I think it was John Maxwell says that leadership is influence. I mean, it doesn't matter who's got the title, who's got the corner office. Leadership is about influencing others, and authentic influence is rooted in love. Mm-hmm. But I've often struggled with this in my own life, because I've asked myself this question: well, what if I'm trying to influence someone and I'm not motivated by love? Mm. What is that? Is that leadership, or is it manipulation?
Yeah,
Saint Thomas Aquinas.
That's a good title of a book.
Yeah. I've got a chapter I wrote a book called Beyond the Parish. It came out in 2020. I've got a chapter on this, because it's something I've struggled with myself. I mean, we all have moments where we might experience authentic love for others and caring for others, and moments where we're selfish and motivated out of our own ego and our own needs. And if we've got influencing gifts, we can use that influence for very selfish reasons. And so I think we've always got to be asking ourselves, what's in it for me? Mm-hmm. And it's not that if there's something in it for us, that's a bad thing, because look, most relationships are mutually negotiated selfishness. I mean, let's be honest. Even in our better days, that's a lot of what reality is. I mean, we're constantly doubly motivated. Our human motives are very complex, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Even when we're serving others and doing charitable works, it can be incredibly selfish. Yeah. So we need to ask ourselves.
And you start asking, about what is true altruism, right? Am I being...
Well, exactly.
Right.
Jesus says, when you give, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Right. And the rabbis of old used to say that the best charity is when the giver does not know who is the recipient, and the recipient does not know who the giver is. It strips it from ego and pride and vanity and using people, and even using charity as a means to an end. So the question, what's in it for me, needs to be asked. Now, it's okay. I would say this: it's okay if there's something in it for you. That's okay. I mean, I figure at the end of the day, if I can finish the day at 51% non-selfishness and only 49% selfishness, that's a good day for me. So it's okay for something to be in it, but you've got to know it. You got to know what it is. Because if you're even in denial about it, or even kind of not even allowing yourself to look at unconscious motives or semi-conscious motives, then there's going to be big trouble ahead. Because one of the things in the world of church, when I speak to parish leaders and when we're trying to motivate and mobilize people to grow and engage spiritually, we've got to be clear about what our motives are. Are we motivated by what we want for people or what we want from people? And here's the thing: it's like that's a dicey one.
And that's the honesty. That's the question, isn't it?
Well, in the business world, I mean, straight out free market economy. It's like, heck, I'm going to sell you this because I want from people. But the irony is that organizations that put as their primary purpose, they're convicted about the value of their product or whatever it is that they sell. that it improves the quality of life. They truly are motivated by what they want for people. In the end, those are the most successful businesses, right? So think about this, what we want for people. I started to say that St. Thomas Aquinas, great philosopher, Catholic theologian and philosopher in the Middle Ages, he defined love a little differently than Turner did. So love is choosing the good of the other.
Right.
Simple as that. Choosing. So it's not feeling, it's not emotion. It's a choice. It resides in the will.
That's right.
And it's choosing the good, willing the good of another, choosing or willing the good of another.
That's right.
And if we say that leadership is influence, and influence is founded on love, then it's about the good of the other. Leadership is not simply about getting people to follow you. It's about raising up other leaders. It's about helping people to grow to maturity, to grow to fruition with their God-given gifts, and be all that they're called to be. So leadership is able to stand in the shadow and watch others come into the light. Authentic leadership rejoices in the fruit that's falling off other people's trees.
Yeah. That's quite beautiful. You just described my dissertation. Thank you. Could you have been on my committee? That, because the biggest challenge for me was because love is at the core of principled leadership, and it was defining love, right? And in that academic world, what does that mean, right? And because there are lots of people who are using love and leadership, absolutely. One of the things that came as part of my own research journey was the question of where is authentic leadership within the realm of what I proposed as principled leadership. And, one of my committee members asked me the question early on when I was up for candidacy. And he said to me, Sharon, I need to know what the difference is between being authentic and being principled, because can you still be an ASSHOLE and be authentic? And you step back and you go, absolutely. And I use the Archie Bunker, when I do presentations and I give, addresses, and I to large groups, I use the little snippet of Archie Bunker, right? Because Archie Bunker felt like he was authentic, right? But, what's the difference? And so, I do a little bit in my own research of not debunking authentic leadership, but when you look at authentic leadership, backing up the bus and saying, you can't be authentic unless you're principled, and where you love, and where you're in the service of others, where you're caring for others, and you're genuinely what you just described in the sense of that balance, right? Between caring, enabling, and, I use a lot of servant leadership theory and methodology in my own work. And it's about that leading and guiding from behind and being able to step back and really grow and let others bloom.
I mean, of course, we have to define what we mean by authentic, but I think most people would agree the most common definition is being true to who you are. Well, what if you're a selfish jerk?
Yeah.
So authentic leadership, if I am openly a selfish jerk, then to be an authentic leader, I am going to lead like a total selfish jerk, and I'm going to shape a selfish, cruel culture in my organization that uses people, and that you could legitimately say is authentic leadership. So authenticity needs it's not enough by itself. We need to have what's true north in a sense. And I think ultimately I think of what Jesus talked about in leadership in the Gospels. I mean, he basically, the night before he died, it's this crazy thing in John's Gospel, in John chapter 13, if you want to look it up, where the night before he dies, he says, look, I'm going to do something here. And he takes off his outer garment and he gets a towel, wraps it around his waist, and he proceeds to wash the feet of his disciples, which was done by the lowliest. Like, this was the crap job that the lowliest slave did. And his followers are like totally scandalized. Like, they're like freaked out, and they're like, no, you can't do this. And afterwards he says, look, if you call me master and Lord, which are pretty lofty titles, and he said, and so I am, and I wash your feet, then how much more do you have to wash one another's feet? This idea of washing one another's feet. So taking the role of a humble slave. Jesus also said, those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. He says, when his disciples were fighting with each other about who was going to get the best jobs, when Jesus took over, because they didn't understand what he was about, he says, the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over those who are under them. He said, it shall not be so among you. And oh man, how much the church has gotten that wrong. Good grief. But so even if you think about it, something very easy in your culture, something I've fought a lot to try to resist it myself, is that, Jesus says that authentic leader, it's the Gentiles, the non-believers that hold it over someone. Like, so you think about in your organization, how many people say, how many direct reports do you have? How many people report to you? And so when we work, we try to change the language. We try to say, instead of direct reports, how many direct supports do you have?
Yeah, right.
Instead of how many people are reporting to you, how many people are supported by you?
Yeah, right. Just reframe.
That doesn't mean you
reframes the whole story.
It's flipping the org chart upside down.
Yeah.
So that people are not the leaders are under those they serve. They're not over them. And I think there's something powerful about that. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have hard conversations. Doesn't mean you can't have evaluations and you can't set goals and have accountability and all of that kind of stuff. But the context is different. Instead of being one of domination and fear and control, reward and punishment, it's relational. It's supportive. It's based on a desire for the good of the person. Of course, the good of the person has to be weighed against the fulfilling the purpose of the mission, which you got to hold those things in tension. But what I'm saying is that approach doesn't mean you can't have the hard conversations.
Yeah, fantastic. Right? Amen.
Yeah.
But that's changing. That's changing. Those words are powerful words in leadership theory, in leadership methodology and philosophy, right? And those words can change how organizations work. Into that simple reframing. I use the art of reframing, and it's just so powerful, right? It's huge. It's huge. I love it. You're awesome. Any final words? I can't believe we're getting up to our kind of last few minutes here, but any
I would say, well, one of the things, and I know that it afflicts all leaders, it's something I've really struggled with, is the whole intent versus impact dynamic. And if any human being is aware of this, that there's often a gap, a considerable gap between what we intend and how we actually impact others. And when we're in a leadership role, the people around us, especially if you're in that power position, people around us are very, very hesitant to really speak to us honestly about how we impact them, how they impact us. Yeah. And we naturally judge ourselves by our intent and judge others by their impact. So, I mean, we've all maybe had people come up to us and say, when you spoke to me this way, this is how it made me feel. Or when you said this, and you were like, well, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. And we give ourselves a pass because we didn't intend to hurt anyone. Yeah. But it doesn't change the fact that our actions have hurt people. And that was something in my own life that I was incredibly blind to. I remember, I'll just tell this one quick story. It was the parish I went to after the one that we were in together. And it was for the first time I had a team of staff members. I'd never had a team of staff members before. And a couple of years in, I hired this woman to be basically in charge of all administrative functions within the parish. We had two locations and HR, administration, buildings, all of the stuff I didn't really care for and wasn't very good at. I was so excited. She was incredibly competent. She had experience in this area. I was beside myself, so excited to bring her onto staff. She started on a Tuesday. Monday had been a holiday. I saw her Wednesday. Thursday was my day off, and I came in Friday to find her letter of resignation on my desk. What? And I was absolutely astounded. So I went around the corner, knocked on her door, and I stepped into her office, and I stood there holding the letter in my hand, just shaking my head. And she turned around, she looked at me, she took her glasses off, she turned to me and she said, "I can't work for you." I was like absolutely shocked. I said, "Why? I don't understand." She said, "I don't like the way you treat people. I can't work for you." She said, "You need to take a course in leadership." And she went into her drawer and gave me a pamphlet, which afterwards I threw in the garbage. I really did. I I was just stunned. I went back into my office and thought, wow, I can't believe I hired the wrong person. Um, but she had the courage to tell me something that I was completely oblivious to. The fact that, not only did I not intend to hurt people through my leadership, I didn't even know I had done it. So I was great at influencing people and getting people to follow me and achieving goals and all of this. But I used to always wonder about why so many people would be lying on the ground when I turned around to celebrate. There was always kind of a bit of a high body count. So that was the beginning of a bit of a painful journey to become aware of the dark side of my leadership skills, to influence and mobilize and lead change, and realize that I have massive blind spots, and I need people around me who have the courage, who have the eyes to see what I don't see, and the courage to smack me on the head. Because I honestly can say I don't think I've ever intended to hurt anyone. And so that was, oh boy, that was probably like 15 years ago, that lesson. I'd like to tell you that I have matured and overcome that part of my personality. But guess what? Even though for the last 5-6 years I've been, speaking and coaching on leadership, I'm back in a new parish now for 3 years, and to my horror, I'm discovering that I'm still struggling with the same basic character flaws I always have. And in one sense, it's more painful because I'm aware. I'm much more aware that I'm still falling into some of the same temptations. So it's a lifelong journey that we have to undergo as leaders. We all have a particular defects and flaws and blind spots. So we need to have people around us who will speak into those, people who we trust and people who love us and care for us. And because the intent versus impact dynamic is real. And if we're in a leadership position, it's hugely significant.
Yeah. Wow. That's a pretty powerful story. And the courage to be able to share it and understand it and to move forward, knowing that, right? To be a different person and to behave differently. What happened to the person?
Oh, she left.
She did.
Oh yeah. She quit.
As you're telling the story, I'm trying to figure out who it is. So it wasn't who I thought it was.
She was out of there.
Wow.
She didn't want to put up with me. And I didn't have a clue what she was talking about. I do now.
You do now.
I don't know where she ended up, but I'm very, very grateful to her. That Friday morning changed my life.
Yeah. You know what? It's in those moments. Like I remember one of the universities I went to work for after Dalhousie. And I was hired to completely change a whole new department that had just been, it was like a school within the university, and big change. And 2 years in, one of the faculty members, who I had a very good rapport with, told me that my nickname was the bulldozer. I was devastated because here I, was known as the sunshine girl, Pollyanna at Dal. And I'm like, what do you mean the bulldozer? And he's like, no, that's in a good way, but you get things done. But again, it's looking in your wake and seeing what you've left behind. And it's not knowing and then knowing, and the acknowledgement of that and taking that on, going, okay, I got to do this a little bit differently. So it's having the courage and being vulnerable and healthy vulnerability, right? And humility. I struggle with humility in my own work, and that balance with confidence and humility, and just how to be that real confident leader and not have that imposter syndrome, and just, owning what and being confident in that, but having the balance of humility to not think that it's all about me, right? So that's every day. But anyway, that's about me. That's another day. That's another conversation. I just love spending time with you and just could chat forever. And you're changing the world.
Wow.
It's amazing. The world is changing because of you. And don't ever forget that. Your impact, your ability, and there might be bodies in the wake, but your gift of believing in and trusting in people, it lights a fire within themselves. And so when somebody, you know this, but when somebody has confidence in you and believes in you, you're going to believe in yourself. And so that's a true gift that you have been able to, you've been able to just, I don't know, use is not even the word I want to use, but utilize, share, empower others. So thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Really appreciate it.
Very much for having me on. It's been
And
great.
we look forward to having you back again. A couple of people from our past I may be chatting with who are now kind of big shakers all over the world, doing amazing, authentic things. Students over the years that I would have worked with at Dell and would have been your parishioners at St. Thomas Aquinas. And so look forward to kind of somehow connecting and reuniting everyone at some point. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Sharon, God bless.
Thanks, Father James, for sharing your precious gems. He's a natural leader, so passionate, and I truly believe the real deal. I've experienced his leadership firsthand and the vulnerability that exists within a courageous leadership. Next week, join me for a conversation with Myrna Gillis, another great Canadian trailblazer.